what it was really like to be Robin Hood in medieval England. The night has fallen over the English Midlands, and the year is somewhere around the late 12th century. The forests are wide, dark, and endless. Thick oaks, ash, and beech trees stretch for miles, their branches knotting together like the vaulted ceiling of a cathedral built by nature. The air smells damp and heavy with wood smoke drifting from distant hearths in hidden villages. A thin mist curls close to the ground, softening the edges of every sound. It is the kind of night when a torch glows dim against the darkness, and a horse's hooves echo for longer than they should on a dirt road. And somewhere, beneath these looming trees, there are whispers. The whispers of outlaws, men who live outside the law, not because they chose rebellion as a sport, but because the world around them has left them no other option. Among them, there is one name that has been passed down for centuries, half truth and half legend, Robin Hood. But in this story, there will be no Hollywood bravado, no exaggerated heroics. Instead, imagine Robin as he might truly have been, a man shaped by the harsh soil of medieval England. His days are not gilded with constant adventure, but filled with hunger, fear, the chill of damp clothes, and the constant edge of danger. Still, within that rough life lies a spark of something captivating, a sense of defiance, of laughter in the face of injustice, and of finding freedom where none was meant to be found. As the listener, you are invited to step quietly into this world. Feel the weight of the forest pressing in on all sides. Hear the distant call of an owl, the snap of a twig underfoot, the faint rush of a stream somewhere out in the dark. This is not a stage play. This is not a legend told to make kings or noblemen look grand. This is a walk through the shadows, where Robin Hood was not a myth, but a man who breathed the same cold air you feel in your imagination now. Tonight, we will travel with him. Not through battles and triumphs alone, but through the slow rhythm of daily survival, the weight of the seasons, and the quiet moments when history is lived, not celebrated. This is what it was really like to be Robin Hood in medieval England. By daylight, the forest shows itself not as a place of mystery, but of necessity. Sherwood, or Barnesdale, depending on which corner of England you imagine him in, is more than just a backdrop for tales of daring. It is a living, breathing environment that dictates everything Robin and his companions do. The ground is soft, muddied from frequent rains, and blanketed with bracken ferns. In spring and summer, wild garlic, nettles, and berries grow thick beneath the trees, offering something edible when bread or meat is scarce. Birds dart in and out of the canopy, sparrows, finches, sometimes a hawk sweeping silently overhead. The crackle of leaves underfoot is constant, broken only by the trickle of a stream or the creak of boughs swaying in the wind. The outlaw's camp is no castle. It is a cluster of lean-tos built of branches and hides, pitched low to the ground so the smoke from a fire can slip quietly into the trees without drawing too much attention. Sleeping spaces are little more than cloaks spread over moss or straw. Each morning begins with the same small rituals, rubbing life into stiff, cold fingers, stoking embers back into flame for warmth and porridge, scanning the edges of the camp for signs of patrols. And beyond the forest edge, ordinary life in medieval England continues, full of detail that explains why Robin's world is what it is. In villages, peasants rise before the sun, stumbling out of low, thatched cottages with walls of timber and dog. They tend fields with oxen-drawn plows, or gather water from the communal well. Smoke curls from chimneys, carrying the smell of peat and dung fires. Dogs bark, hens scratch, and carts creak down muddy lanes lined with ruts so deep they fill with water for weeks. It is a world where hunger is familiar, where bread is often coarse and blackened with ground-up peas or beans instead of pure wheat. Meat is a luxury, ale is safer than water, and illness spreads quickly through both town and countryside. The people are bound by custom, religion, and the weight of authority, from their lord, their sheriff, and above all, the king. And yet, between these two worlds, the forest and the village, Robin Hood and his men move like shadows. They are neither entirely part of the peasantry, nor nobles. They live in the in-between, outlaws who must understand every detail of their surroundings if they are to survive. Every tree, every hollow, every path through the underbrush becomes a tool, a hiding place, or a means of escape. Life here is not heroic in the way ballads suggest. It is muddy boots, aching backs, the smoke of a damp fire that never quite catches, and a cautious glance always cast over the shoulder. To be Robin Hood is to be at once part of this medieval world, and forever outside it. Day by day, life as an outlaw settles into a pattern, though it is a routine filled more with uncertainty than comfort. The morning begins with hunger. Bread, if any, is coarse, dark, and often stale. More often it is porridge made from oats or barley, boiled with water from a nearby stream, flavored only by a pinch of wild herbs gathered the day before. On lucky days, a rabbit snared in the night or a handful of fish from the river may stretch the meal a little further. After eating, the day divides itself between caution and necessity. Someone must always keep watch, eyes trained on the forest paths for the glint of armor or the sound of hooves. Others tend to small, practical tasks, mending a bowstring, reshaping an arrowhead, or patching a worn cloak with scraps of cloth. Wood must be gathered for fires, but always sparingly. Too much smoke means discovery. For Robin himself, and those closest to him, the constant routine is one of decision-making. Who is safe to trust? Which road might bear a wealthy traveler today? When is it wiser to remain unseen than to act? There is no single grand heist each morning. Instead, there are weeks of waiting, of watching, of ordinary survival. And always, there is the weather. In summer, flies swarm around sweat-dampened skin, and the air hangs heavy with heat beneath the canopy. In winter, the forest becomes bitter and unyielding. Cold seeps into boots, into bones. Blankets are thin, food is scarcer still, and illness lingers. Coughs echo among the men, and there is no physician in the woods. It is a life that tests patience as much as courage. The outlaw's freedom is not one of endless adventure, but of enduring hardship while finding ways to make it bearable. A song sung around the fire, a tale retold, a shared loaf broken between hands, these small rituals hold the men together as much as any daring raid or act of defiance. For Robin Hood, routine is not only survival. It is also a lesson in living at the edge of society, where each day must balance invisibility with boldness, hunger with hope, silence with the occasional roar of rebellion. To understand Robin Hood, you must first understand the world that made him an outlaw. Medieval England was a land bound tightly by law, but law, in those days, was less about justice and more about power. Forests like Sherwood were not open commons where anyone could roam. They were royal forests, vast stretches of land claimed by the king, where hunting deer was forbidden to common people. To kill a stag in these woods could cost you your hand, or your life. And yet hunger does not heed royal decrees. A starving family might risk everything for a single deer to feed them through the winter. A desperate man might be driven to the greenwood rather than the gallows. Outlaws were not always villains, they were often men pushed beyond the narrow margins of survival permitted by the feudal system. It is here that Robin's story becomes more than mere routine. For in him, and in the songs and whispers about him, there is a deeper theme. He was not just surviving in the forest, he was resisting a structure that seemed immovable. To the peasants who toiled under harsh taxes, who bent their backs beneath their lord's demands, the image of a man who struck back, who outwitted sheriffs and nobles, was a spark of quiet hope. Whether Robin Hood truly robbed the rich to feed the poor, or whether that was a story polished by centuries of retelling, matters less than the meaning it carried. The very idea that someone outside the system could tilt it, even slightly, toward fairness, resonated deeply in a world where fairness was rare. In this way, Robin's daily struggles, muddy boots, empty stomach, constant vigilance, took on a symbolic weight. He became more than a man of the forest. He became a reflection of every commoner's wish for a world where the poor might laugh in the face of the powerful, if only for a moment. This is the turning point where Robin's life, harsh and ordinary as it may have been, begins to shape into something more enduring. A man in the shadows, whose struggles embodied not just survival, but a quiet defiance that history would not forget. By the late 12th and early 13th centuries, England itself was a kingdom in tension. Kings rode to war abroad, Richard the Lionheart to crusades, John to endless squabbles with France, while their absence or failures left heavy burdens on the people at home. Taxes were demanded in coin, food, or labor, and for those with little to spare, the weight was crushing. Justice, too, was uneven. The sheriff, that figure forever tied to Robin's legend, was not a kindly protector of order but the king's man, tasked with enforcing laws that served crown and lord before common folk. Sheriffs collected fines, oversaw executions, and hunted down those who dared to live outside the system. To the villagers, they were feared far more than admired. Religion wrapped itself around daily life like the air itself. Church bells rang across fields, calling people to prayer and confession, reminding them that their place in the world was divinely ordained. The poor were taught to endure hardship with patience, while the wealthy were told their power was part of God's plan. To resist authority was, in a sense, to risk one's soul as well as one's body. It was in this climate that tales of Robin Hood gained their power. They spoke of a man who, though outlawed, defied not only the sheriff but the very idea that the rich and powerful had the right to hoard while the poor starved. Ballads sung in smoky taverns or whispered at market stalls carried his name, shaping him into more than a local bandit. He was imagined as a trickster who mocked corrupt officials, as a leader who shared bread with his men, as a bold figure who tipped the balance of a very unequal world. And yet, the truth was likely humbler. A small band of men hiding in the greenwood, moving carefully between forest and village, living always on the edge of hunger and capture. Still, their very existence raised a quiet question: if even a handful of outlaws could slip through the king's grasp, what else might be possible? In this wider context, Robin Hood was not only a man of the forest, but a reflection of the anxieties and longings of medieval society itself. His story was both an escape and a protest, a way for people to imagine fairness where none seemed to exist. It is easy to picture Robin Hood as nothing but a bowman in green, forever ready with a laugh or a daring trick. But in the quiet hours of the forest, stripped of ballads and legend, he was still a man. Imagine him in the stillness of dawn, sitting on a damp log, tightening the string on his bow with hands that are calloused, cracked, and stiff from cold. His cloak is worn thin, patched so many times it is more stitches than fabric. His boots are heavy with mud, and hunger gnaws at his stomach as insistently as it does for any peasant. Around him, his companions stir, men who have become his makeshift family. There is laughter sometimes, low and rough, over an old story told again by the fire. There is companionship in shared struggle, one man showing another how to mend a broken arrow shaft, or the quiet generosity of splitting a last heel of bread. These small gestures mean survival as much as any daring raid. But there is also the weight of loneliness. To live as an outlaw is to live without the comfort of a true home. Nights stretch long, and in the pauses between conversation and song, one wonders what Robin thought of. Did he remember his childhood? Did he imagine a different life, one in which the walls of a cottage sheltered him instead of the canopy of trees? Did he ever long for the warmth of a hearth, the laughter of a family, or the rhythm of a village bell marking the hours of the day? Even a figure who would become legend could not escape ordinary fears. A cough that does not fade could be the beginning of death. A wrong decision on the road might mean a gallows noose. And yet, to wake each morning and still laugh, to still share what little you have, is a kind of defiance in itself. In these human details, mud on his boots, the ache in his bones, the fleeting smile at a companion's joke, Robin Hood becomes more than an outlaw or a legend. He becomes someone we can almost sit beside, someone whose world was as fragile and uncertain as our own. For all the warmth of companionship, the outlaw's life was edged with danger. Each crack of a branch in the distance, each unfamiliar voice carried on the wind, might mean discovery. The sheriff's men patrolled not only the roads but sometimes the fringes of the woods themselves, searching for signs of camps, ashes in the soil, footprints in the mud, broken branches where someone passed too quickly. Punishment for outlawry was brutal. To be caught was to face the rope, the gallows raised high so the whole village might see the warning. The law offered no mercy. To be outside it was to be hunted, and the fear of capture lingered like a shadow at the edge of every firelit gathering. Hunger, too, was a constant enemy. A rabbit caught in a snare could make the difference between a warm belly and an aching night. In lean seasons, when game was scarce, men grew restless, tempers short, their laughter quieter. Malnutrition showed in their bodies, hollow cheeks, gaunt eyes, joints that ached more than they should in men so young. And then there was betrayal. In a world where survival was fragile, trust was both precious and perilous. A villager might offer food or shelter, but could also report an outlaw's presence for a handful of coins. Robin and his companions learned to watch faces carefully, to weigh every kindness against the risk it carried. Even the forest itself could turn hostile. Winter storms snapped branches and soaked everything in icy rain. Summer droughts dried streams and left the ground hard and unforgiving. The very place that shielded them was also a source of constant trial. In ballads, conflict is always clear, the noble outlaw against the cruel sheriff. But in truth, the harsher reality was quieter. It was the ache of hunger, the sharpness of cold, the endless knowledge that the law was against them. Each day lived was both a victory and a reminder of how fragile freedom truly was. And yet, through this weight of danger and hardship, Robin and his men endured. Not because it was easy, but because, somehow, even this harsh life seemed better than bending their necks beneath the heavy yoke of lords and sheriffs. As daylight fades, the forest changes its voice. The chatter of birds falls silent, replaced by the low hum of insects and the occasional rustle of a creature settling in the undergrowth. Shadows stretch long across the ground, and the trees seem to lean closer together, weaving a darker roof overhead. For Robin and his companions, this is the hour when watchfulness gives way, little by little, to the small comforts of routine. A fire is coaxed to life, its smoke curling carefully upward, kept low so it blends with the night air. Around it, the men gather, their faces flickering in the glow, the hard lines of the day softened by the gentle play of light and shadow. They share what food they have, perhaps a crust of bread, a bit of salted meat if fortune has been kind, or a stew thin but warming. The meal is not a feast, yet the act of eating together turns it into something more, a reassurance that, despite hardship, they are not alone. Stories are told, sometimes of distant villages, sometimes of saints or kings, sometimes of nothing at all, just jokes passed back and forth, weary laughter rising softly into the night. For a time, even the weight of outlaw life is set aside, replaced by the rhythm of companionship. When at last the fire burns down to embers, the forest grows quiet again. Each man lies where he can, on a cloak spread over bracken, or on the bare earth itself. The sounds of the night become a lullaby of sorts, the hoot of an owl, the whisper of wind through the branches, the steady trickle of a nearby stream. Robin, too, rests. The bough at his side is never far, the thought of danger never wholly gone. Yet for these few hours, beneath the canopy of trees, there is a fragile kind of peace. The day's struggles are behind them, and tomorrow has not yet arrived. In this pause, in this hush, life feels almost whole. The forest cradles them in its vast silence, and the outlaws close their eyes, letting sleep soften the hard edges of their world. And so, the day fades into silence, leaving Robin Hood and his companions resting beneath the watchful boughs of Sherwood. Their lives were not woven from endless heroics, but from moments of hunger, laughter, danger, and endurance. They were men who lived on the margins, carving out freedom where little was granted, holding on to scraps of dignity in a world that often gave none. The legends that grew from their struggles would be polished and reshaped over centuries. Robin turned into a flawless hero, his vow always true, his cause always just. But beneath the songs and stories lies the simpler truth, that he was, above all, a man. A man who walked the damp earth, breathed the cold air, and dreamed, perhaps, of a world more fair than the one he knew. As you sit here, centuries later, the forest has changed, the laws have changed, and the world has shifted beyond recognition. Yet something in Robin's story still lingers. Perhaps it is the universal longing for fairness, the quiet wish to resist what feels unjust. Or perhaps it is simply the image of a fire in the woods, friends gathered close, and the fragile peace of nightfall after a long day. Let that image stay with you now. The glow of the embers fading, the hush of the trees, the sense of safety found in the heart of uncertainty. For in the end, Robin Hood's story is not only about defiance, it is also about finding moments of rest, even in the hardest of times. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the forest holding you too, the steady rhythm of night sounds, the cool air against your skin, the knowledge that, for this moment, you are safe, and you are still.